Have you ever felt like your personality is just you? No matter how much you try to change certain habits, you always seem to revert back to your default setting. You try to be the life of the party, but after 2 hours, your social battery is blinking red. Or maybe you promise yourself you won't overthink things this time, but the moment your head hits the pillow, your brain decides it's the perfect time to review every mistake you've made since 2014. What if I told you that a huge part of who you are was decided before you even took your first breath? For decades, we believed that we were born as blank slates, that our parents, our environment, and our experiences completely shaped our personalities. It's a comforting thought, right? The idea that we have total control over who we become. But modern neuroscience, behavioral genetics, and long-term twin studies have completely shattered this illusion. Science now shows that your personality isn't just a collection of learned behaviors. It's literally wired into the physical structure of your brain and encoded in your DNA. Today, we are going to look at every major personality trait that science says you were born with. Some of these will explain why you act the way you do, and others might just change how you view the people around you forever. Let's start with the most obvious one, and perhaps the most misunderstood: introversion and extroversion. Most people think being an introvert just means you're shy, or being an extrovert means you're outgoing. But science reveals it has very little to do with social skills and everything to do with how your brain handles dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for reward and pleasure. If you are a natural extrovert, your brain's dopamine reward network is less sensitive. You need more stimulation, louder music, more people, higher stakes to get that satisfying rush of dopamine. You are genetically predisposed to seek out external rewards. Introverts, on the other hand, are born with a highly sensitive dopamine system. A small amount of social stimulation goes a long way. In fact, too much stimulation overwhelms the nervous system, which is why introverts feel physically exhausted after a large social gathering. Instead of dopamine, the introverted brain relies heavily on acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter linked to internal reflection, deep focus, and calm. So, if you've ever felt guilty for wanting to leave a party early, don't. Your brain is literally telling you that your chemical threshold has been met. This makes me curious about you watching this right now. Do you find yourself constantly seeking out new, high-energy environments? Or do you prefer the quiet comfort of your own space to recharge? Let me know down in the comments. I always find the split between introverts and extroverts fascinating. Now, let's talk about the trait that dictates how you handle stress: neuroticism or emotional sensitivity. Nobody wants to be called neurotic, but in psychology, it simply refers to your baseline level of emotional reactivity. Are you the kind of person who remains cool and detached when a crisis hits? Or do you immediately feel the physical weight of anxiety in your chest? Studies on infants have shown that we are born with a specific temperament when it comes to emotional sensitivity. Researchers can measure an infant's heart rate, pupil dilation, and cortisol levels when exposed to a loud noise or an unfamiliar face. Some babies remain completely calm, while others exhibit extreme distress. Fast forward 20 years, and those easily distressed babies often grow up to be adults who score higher in neuroticism. This is because of the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. If you were born with a highly reactive amygdala, your brain is constantly scanning the environment for potential danger. You are literally wired to worry. While this sounds like a burden in the modern world, from an evolutionary standpoint, this trait kept our ancestors alive. The hypervigilant individuals were the ones who heard the predator in the bushes before anyone else did. If you are finding this breakdown of the human mind fascinating so far, make sure you hit that like button so I know to make more deep dives into psychology, just like this one. Next on the list of inherited traits is openness to experience. Have you ever wondered why some people are perfectly content eating the exact same breakfast, driving the exact same route to work, and taking the exact same vacation every year, while others feel suffocated by routine? Openness to experience is a core personality trait that determines your imagination, your artistic interests, and your appetite for novelty. And yes, it is deeply rooted in your genetics. People who score high in openness have a cognitive mechanism that naturally filters out less information. Their brains allow more sensory input and abstract thoughts to flow into their conscious awareness. They are the dreamers, the artists, the philosophers. They thrive on the unknown. On the flip side, those born with lower openness have brains that are highly efficient at filtering out unnecessary data. They are practical, grounded, and prefer the tried and true over the abstract and unproven. Neither is better than the other. Society needs both the visionary to invent the airplane and the practical engineer to make sure it actually flies safely. Then we have conscientiousness, the trait that dictates your self-discipline, organization, and impulse control. Are you the person who has a color-coded calendar and always shows up 5 minutes early? Or are you the person who thrives in organized chaos, constantly racing against deadlines? Conscientiousness is heavily linked to the development and activity of the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for executive function and future planning. Studies comparing the brains of highly conscientious people to those who are more impulsive show distinct differences in how this brain region regulates the more primitive, reward-seeking areas of the brain. If you were born with a highly active prefrontal cortex, you naturally find it easier to delay gratification. You can skip the junk food because you are focused on the long-term goal of health. If your prefrontal cortex is less dominant, you live more in the present moment, making you more spontaneous, but also more prone to procrastination. Speaking of procrastination and habits, I'm curious, which of these traits do you think is your strongest? Are you naturally highly disciplined, or are you highly open to new ideas, but struggle with structure? Drop a comment below with your strongest trait. It's always interesting to see how different traits overlap in people. Now, let's look at agreeableness. This is your default setting for empathy, cooperation, and how much you prioritize social harmony over personal gain. If you are highly agreeable, you are naturally compassionate, trusting, and willing to compromise. If you are lower in agreeableness, you are more competitive, skeptical, and willing to engage in conflict to get what you want. This trait is heavily influenced by your genetic baseline for oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. People born with more dense oxytocin receptors in their brains literally experience a stronger chemical reward when they help others or maintain social harmony. It feels physically good to them to be agreeable. Those with fewer receptors don't get the same internal reward for pleasing people, making it much easier for them to say no, set hard boundaries, and engage in debate without feeling emotional distress. We also have to talk about risk tolerance and thrill-seeking. Have you ever looked at someone jumping out of a plane or climbing a sheer rock face and thought, why on earth would anyone do that? Or maybe you are the person jumping out of the plane. Thrill-seeking behavior is tied to a specific genetic variation involving the DRD4 gene, which helps regulate dopamine receptors. People with certain variations of this gene require intense, high adrenaline experiences to feel the same level of excitement that a normal person might feel from simply winning a board game. Their baseline for arousal is so high that everyday life feels unbearably mundane. They aren't crazy. Their brains are just starving for stimulation that only extreme risk can provide. At this point, you might be feeling a little trapped. If our sociability, our anxiety levels, our discipline, our empathy, and even our appetite for risk are encoded in our DNA and brain structure, do we have any free will at all? Are we just biological robots playing out a pre-written genetic script? If you are enjoying this exploration into the hidden mechanics of human nature, and you want to keep unraveling the mysteries of the mind with me, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We dive into the psychology of why we do the things we do every single week, and I'd love to have you join the community. So, are we trapped by our genetics? The answer is a resounding no. This is where the magic of epigenetics and neuroplasticity comes into play. Yes, science says you are born with a baseline for these traits, But a baseline is exactly that, a starting point, not a finish line. Think of your genetic personality traits like a rubber band. Your DNA dictates how thick the rubber band is and its resting state. Some rubber bands are naturally tight, others are loose. But your environment, your experiences, and your conscious choices are the hands pulling on that rubber band. If you are born highly neurotic, your default state might be anxious. But through therapy, mindfulness, and cognitive behavioral techniques, you can stretch that rubber band. You can train your amygdala to become less reactive. You might never be the most laid-back person in the room, but you can learn to manage your default setting. If you are born low in conscientiousness, you might never naturally love spreadsheets and rigid schedules. But you can learn to build external systems, set alarms, and create habits that mimic the behavior of a highly disciplined person. Our environment acts as a trigger for our genetics. You could be born with the genetic markers for extreme introversion, but if you are raised in an environment that gently encourages public speaking and social interaction, you will stretch your rubber band. You adapt. You grow. The beauty of understanding the personality traits you were born with isn't to use them as an excuse. It's to give yourself grace. When you understand that your exhaustion after a party isn't a social failure, but a biological reality of your dopamine system, you stop fighting yourself. When you realize that your partner's need for routine isn't them being boring, but a reflection of their genetic openness level, you stop judging them. Science shows us what we are born with so we can understand our foundation. You are a canvas, and your genetics have provided the underlying sketch. But you are the one holding the paintbrush. You get to decide the colors, the shading, and the final masterpiece. Your default settings do not define your destiny. They just define the unique game you are playing. And once you know the rules of your own biology, you finally have the power to win.